WorkJoy Jam podcast. I'm your host, Beth Stallwood, and today I have a wonderful conversation with Priya Velusami, founder of Priya. Priya has such a wonderful background and really interesting journey from being an employee to running a side hustle to making that her full-time business, growing the business, changing the business through the pandemic, and working with a really values-led approach, working on the idea of reusing and recycling, of giving back to communities. And I really love this conversation. I hope you do too. Welcome to this podcast with the wonderful Priya Velusami. I am really excited for this conversation. But rather than me introduce Priya, can I hand over to you? And can you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do now, and then maybe dive in and tell us your career journey and how you got to doing what it is you do now?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Beth. So I am Priya. I am founder of Priya. And Priya is my small business selling upcycled accessories and kidswear that use pre-loved Indian saris. And how did I get here? Well, I've basically had 20 years in a retail career. And the last 5 of those, I was running a side hustle alongside my full-time job. And I just have basically last year decided to pursue my passion, which is design, dressmaking, and colourful fabrics, and go full time running my business, which is where I am now.
Amazing.
So, yeah, in terms of how I got to doing what I do, the business was really inspired many, many years ago by my grandmother, who would visit us from India during summer holidays. And she taught me how to sew, and she introduced me to kind of this zero waste concept, but I guess is very common for that generation of not wasting anything. And she would use up, all sorts of scraps of fabric, and we'd put them to use in make scrunchies or little baby dresses. And she was always dressed in a beautiful, colourful Indian sari as well. So I guess she's definitely been the inspiration. And then it was a few years ago when my niece was born that I thought, actually, my mum's got a whole load of old saris she doesn't use. Maybe I can make my niece some colourful dresses from those that, are just kind of gathering dust.
Yeah.
So I went to make some party dresses for her. They got lovely comments, and I just listed a few on Etsy, the marketplace.
Wow.
And it's kind of, grown from there, really.
So from something that was a family thing that you were doing for your niece, that you were taking inspiration from your lovely grandma and working through these things, it's now become your full-time gig.
It has, yeah. And it's really grown organically, I'd say. It wasn't there wasn't a launch. I can't say that, it's there was a specific date that the business had a birthday on or what have you, but it's just grown organically from something I've enjoyed doing. I love dressmaking. And then Etsy is a great way to trial an idea and see if it's got any sort of interest or customers, and that's where it's kind of taken off.
Amazing. I've got loads of questions for you. Are you ready for me to dive in? Because there's
Go
so
for
many
it.
wonderful things. I'd love to know, when you were doing this as a side hustle, what was the kind of work you were doing in your kind of employed job versus your side hustle? Because it's always really interesting to see the connections or not and how these things link together.
Oh, interesting. So my 20 years of retail was all with the same company, which is John Lewis. And many years of that was actually in what I would have said was my dream job, which was sourcing textiles and fabrics and home linen, really. So I was very much working in the world of textiles, and that was giving me my satisfaction of kind of creative side and working with fabrics. But in the time when I did my side hustle, I had moved on from that, and I was doing a more of a kind of project management role in the online side of the business, which I also really enjoyed. It was a bit less creative, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. So you had this. So you've been working in the world of fabric and textiles from a sourcing perspective, but
Yeah,
not from a making, creating
exactly.
perspective.
Yeah.
And so I'm always really interested. How did you get into that side of life in the first place? Was it always inspired by this kind of love of fabrics that your grandma gave you, even to go into that side of life?
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, at the same time as when I was sewing with my grandma at sort of 10, I guess I would actually go into the haberdashery department of John Lewis and watch those ladies on their sewing machines and just think, oh, that's such a cool job. And then that, many years later wasn't quite what I did, but I did know that there was a heritage of textiles and haberdashery, and there might be some sort of way to get my fix if I joined the company, and that's where I did end up. So it was definitely a passion that was inspired by those summer holidays where my grandma introduced me to just creating something, really. I think that was the excitement that I got, was just you would be with a whole load of scraps or bits of fabric, and then at the end of the day we'd have something we can use, or give or gift. So
Yeah, I love that. So it's kind of the whole career, whether it's the role as the founder of Preepy or working as you did sourcing textiles, has all come from this really wonderful childhood experience and that creativity, even if it's not been directly doing that stuff.
exactly, yes, it definitely as was a huge influence, I think.
Yeah, love that. And I didn't, the haberdashery department wasn't one when I was a kid, but I used to love to go and watch the people wrap presents,
Oh,
the wrapping station. And I will offer I do all of the wrapping in our house. I love it. I
do
love to
you?
wrap presents. And I think it's so funny, isn't it? Like we could talk about the John Lewis inspiration of
Oh,
childhood dreams. But yeah,
so
I
true, who you want.
love wrapping presents.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, I'm definitely not a good rapper. And that
Oh.
is one of the things I would say in my current job, where I do have to wrap the items that I send out, that I'm really not very good at it. So apologies to people who receive. But yeah, I try my best, but it definitely.
It's funny, isn't it, how these
Yeah.
little bits of inspiration keeping the joy going throughout,
Yes.
20 years later or 30 years later, wherever you're at. So talk to me a little bit about stepping into, because so many listeners of ours are interested in things like side hustles and in things like, what do we do to bring us joy, but that can also be work related? And it sounds to me like at first this was just about the joy and the family
Mhm.
and creating it. What made you step from I'm going to do this for my niece to I'm going to see if I can sell these? What was the moment, if you remember it, that made you just give it a go?
It was probably validation from other people who saw the dresses and were like, "Oh, I'd like one of those." Or do you do those? Do you sell those? And it was kind of this penny dropping of like, well, I don't, but I could. And
Yeah.
actually, does this suggest that there is a market out there for something unique, colourful, handmade? I guess something a bit different from perhaps the standard high street shops for
Mm,
party wear for little girls. And I think there was it just didn't feel that scary, because people told me at the time about Etsy, and it's a marketplace where you can really just, without any real effort, see if there is a market for what you're
yeah.
doing. And it allows you that creative outlet, and then you can see, and I remember getting my kind of first sale from someone I didn't know over in America, and I was just amazed. I was like, wow, someone has found me. They've wanted to spend money on what I've designed and created, and it gave me a lovely review. It was such an exciting kind of emotion that I thought, I've got to try and do this again.
Yeah. and then you get addicted and you want to kind
Yeah,
of keep going.
exactly.
So like a real, I'd call it like a real moment of work joy when you see that come to life, when somebody wants it and buys it and you're like, oh, this is actually something.
Yeah,
It's not just a little hobby that I'm doing for my
completely.
family.
Yeah, it was definitely that. It was, yeah, like I say, validation and just excitement. And then it gave me pleasure to think that they had now, been excited, and their little girl
Mm,
was excited to wear this dress and given them joy, essentially.
yeah. It's like passing it on.
Mm.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And since that time, when you kind of first put some things onto Etsy, how has it grown for you? And what have you done to make that happen?
So again, it's really evolved. So Etsy was great for a few years, like I say, as a side hustle where I was making the dresses. But dressmaking is quite time consuming.
Mm,
So I when I made the decision to kind of go full time with the business, I realized I would need to outsource the kind of making up. And I found a wonderful charity in Mumbai, in India, which is where my grandmother lived, who basically upskill underprivileged women in tailoring. So they train them up to become tailors. So they're often women who have never had any education or opportunities before. And after the training, they can then go and either get employment or start their own business. And I send them my designs, and then they make them up. And through their kind of course, this is they're able to kind of practice or make things that I've designed. And it's yeah, that's been a real, I guess, a change to the business from
mm,
what was originally just kind of a hobby of mine, dressmaking. But the other thing that I've had to do is through the pandemic, the demand for party wear kind of decreased considerably.
funny
So,
that.
yes. So I did pivot a bit, and I have now expanded my range to include things like accessories, so bags and decoration like bunting and wreaths and sort of uh, uh, scrunchies. So yeah, there's lots of things in the pipeline.
Oh, amazing. And I'm really interested about this charity in Mumbai that you sourced to help you with this. Is you could have gone anywhere, right? You could have gone, I just need to get some people to make these things up for me.
Yeah,
But it sounds like you wanted to do something that with your business actually has that sense of responsibility and that sense of connection and the sense of doing something good as
yeah,
well as doing it as a business. And I'm really interested in like that process of thinking, how do I do this in this way?
absolutely. I mean, the the business is kind of founded on the basis of reusing materials
Yeah.
and recycling and upcycling, and that for me was important. But I also thought, if I do want to run a business, I'd definitely like to have an element where there is either a donation to charity or there's something that I can give back. And
Yeah.
the charity that is in India, it's called the Anamed Charitable Trust. They basically aligned perfectly with my values. And you're
Mm,
right, I did look around. I looked, both here in the UK and in India for manufacturers, and everything that they did and are doing, it just felt like that that aligned with my brand values,
yeah.
and I would be able to give back. I am a purpose driven business. I want to continue to be, and it's also where my grandmother lived, so it felt like I was giving back to the ladies in the same
Mm,
city. Um, so that all of that, um, yeah, just made perfect sense. And they do, obviously they're learning, they're not always, it can be a kind of a longer process, but
Mm.
in terms of manufacturing. But it's very rewarding to know and hear that some of the women who've never had an opportunity to earn any income previously have now felt confidence. They've
Mm.
really enjoyed being part of a community of other women in a similar situation. And some of them go on to be female founders like me. And I
Oh,
really
wow.
love the fact that it gives them, that kind of, confidence and opportunity.
It's a lovely thinking as well, isn't it? Almost like that full circle back to your grandma's world,
Totally. Yeah.
and connecting with the people, maybe the grandchildren of people that she knew, or
Yeah. Yeah.
great grandchildren, or whatever it is, and that sense of community and doing the right thing. And for me, there's something really powerful here about, from the beginning, like baking in to your business the reuse, recycle, give back. um it's so good to do it from the start
Yeah.
versus trying to. And I always think that, I mean, it's harder when you're an even bigger business, but trying to retrofit those things in when that isn't how you started is quite a difficult thing to do sometimes when you've
Yeah.
got a business. But starting that way and being really mindful about it from the beginning is a really wonderful way of getting things going.
Yeah, it feels like it's definitely a real core of my business, and I want it to continue. And I love really being able to share the fact that I've got these links and kind of I guess I'm very much part of the Indian culture as well as being brought up in London, so I can bring both together.
Yeah, I love that. And the other thing, just to pick up, because I picked up on more the charity side of things, but also this thing that you're running a small business for party wear mid-pandemic. Um, Obviously, I mean, I'm sure it's picking up again now because there's lots of parties going on
Yeah.
now. But having to kind of make that pivot, everyone talked about pivoting there. I was so fed up of hearing the word, but like going, okay, so how do we do something that still is what we do, but add these other products in? That must have been quite a kind of big, right, let's try and do something here moment.
Yes, actually, I forgot my my very first pivot was face masks because,
Yeah,
of course, you know, um, suddenly a way to put to use very small pieces of fabric.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, there was definitely, but I quite, again, it gave me an opportunity to exercise my creative side and figure how what I can do with all these pieces of fabric. And I guess I wasn't sure there would be demand for, because every kind of accessory is unique, every bag is
mm,
unique, and it's a bit harder to kind of sell in a way because you don't. It's not like the dresses where you can see there's a pink skirt and a blue top or whatever. So you
yeah.
kind of buy and you say, right, I'll just have a kind of green one or any color one, because essentially all of them are lovely, I say, but
Yeah,
you don't
they're great.
necessarily know the color combination you're getting. And but yeah, people are it's been great to see that people are just very happy to receive the all types of every single type of
Mm.
combination and pattern, and it's worked well.
And it's interesting because this is like the recycling part of the, it could be a really old pattern, it could be really new, it could be
Mm.
somewhere in between. And that lovely kind of bringing back round different fashions and different colors, and
Yes.
um maybe it not always being about, here are 20 versions of exactly the same thing. Here are they might be a dress, but there's a dress with something that's completely different to something else, and it changes its what it is because of the reusing factor.
Yeah, and that is the thing, if you are my kind of customer, I guess you accept that everything is unique and you don't always know. Then that's
Mm,
good, and that's you're happy with that. And I understand that there's a different type of customer who may want to know exactly what they're getting and want repeats of the same thing. But yeah, it's nice to see there is a market for what I'm doing.
yeah, it's lovely. And talk to me a little bit about thinking about, obviously, the work joy related to this. I have visions of you, Priya, like sitting at your sewing machine, putting bits of fabric together, making a pattern work, and just being totally in the zone, like loving every minute of it, because it's where your creative outlet is, right? It's like, oh, this is brilliant. And then when it becomes a business and you need to outsource that thing and other people are doing that, how do you get some of that joy into the other parts of running the business, because you're maybe not spending so much time doing the creative thing, which is what got you excited to start it in the first place?
Oh yeah, that's very true. It's quite hard letting go, I have to say, um, because it's kind of a realization that, you know, this is not your hobby anymore.
Yeah.
But I do get joy from the designing side, and I do get real joy from being able to communicate with the people who are making, explaining my designs,
Yeah.
and seeing how they translate them and how they then create something as well. And it gives them joy. So in a
Okay.
sense, it's a different type. It's not the, you know, the what you described there of me on my sewing machine. It's just exactly what I do.
I could just picture you
Yeah,
now, right
that
now. I
is
could do
right.
it.
And I still get a chance to do that, kind of creating samples and you know, making up sample designs. So it hasn't gone completely. And I get different elements now, like I say, of getting someone else to translate them. And I've really enjoyed learning different skills. So because I guess I was in a career where I was doing very similar things for a long time,
Mm.
my learning curve was pretty flat. But now, obviously, when you're running a business, you have to have a huge number of different hats. And some of it's quite overwhelming, but it's been really enjoyable to learn lots and lots of different new skills. Um, and there is absolutely realization that I can't do it all, and I like some of it less than others. So
Yeah.
we'll definitely work on I guess outsourcing the things that I'm just not as skilled at, or not as good at, but
Yeah.
having an understanding of, for example, how a website works, or having an understanding of, you know, what you know, marketing trends are, and what how to create video reels, etc.,
Mm.
is important, and has been a different side, but still quite can, you know, have elements of creativity. It's just, I think when it becomes um, overwhelming and all too consuming, that you think you've got to do it all, that's when all the joy gets taken out.
Yeah. And actually, one of the things I just really loved about what you were saying there is, when you're talking about other people and seeing how they get some joy in creating your dresses and accessories, is that I have a theory that joy is actually quite catching, and seeing other
Mm.
people having the joy actually brings joy to yourself if you can interpret it in that way. Um,
Yeah,
so it's really lovely to see that. And also that idea that learning new things, and learning for me is a massive part of how people get joy, is that sense of growth and understanding and new
yeah,
things, and whether you learn them and then decide that they're not for you
yeah,
to
yeah,
do, or
which
you learn them and you go, oh, hang on a minute, I had no idea I was so nerdy about marketing trends.
yeah. Yeah,
And you can it's a path of discovery, isn't it? I think when you're starting a new business and you're working through these things, is learning them is one part, and then deciding whether that's the thing you're going to do all the time or not is a whole nother way of looking at your business and the growth and where you might get to.
that definitely. Yeah, I think those are two really, really, yeah, clear, important elements of creating WorkJoy, actually.
Yeah.
Mm.
And a question I have for you now is, thinking about that this came from like a hobby, is
Mm.
are you able to do any of the sewing stuff again just as a hobby? Have you come full circle and it's able to be that, or is it still very worky at the moment?
Um, uh, it, so I would say I haven't, but that's not a reflection of the fact that I'm associating it with work. It's more a reflection that I just, yeah, have a young family, and I've decided
Yeah.
I'm not giving that. That's not where my time is being spent currently. So
Yeah.
I do still have my pile of fabrics that I I look at and lust after and think of ways to make up, but it's for a later date.
Yeah. And, that's a big challenge as well. I imagine, I kind of only imagine, but through the pandemic, because you've got a family, trying to pivot your business, trying to, I imagine, homeschool some kids,
Mm,
trying to work through all of this, is that sometimes making those choices about what we spend our time doing,
yeah.
we have to go, do you know what? That one isn't going to be top priority right now.
That's the thing, yeah. I mean, and also I think with dressmaking, it's not something you can just dip in and dip out of, really. You do need a chunk of time where, you can get everything out and you can really make it up for, you need a few hours, or I do,
Yeah.
and to get into the zone. And so, yeah, I don't do that at the moment, but it's I don't feel like I've lost it, because I am getting elements of it through my day job now.
Yeah. And it's an interesting one when I've talked speak to different people about when your hobby becomes your job,
Yeah.
whether you might lose your love for it. And that's
Oh
a hard
yeah.
thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I imagine that can be, yeah, difficult for many people, especially where they've potentially got a lot of pressure to make volumes.
Mm,
I think that can lead to kind of loss of the enjoyment. But ultimately, you've got to come back to why you're doing what you're doing,
yeah.
and if it is a true passion, then remember why you're doing it.
Mm,
I think that's got to feature in there.
yeah, that's such good advice, isn't it? Because running a business is hard, right? It's not
Yeah.
an easy thing. And that idea of coming back to why you're doing it,
Mm,
remembering what your purpose was with it, and being able to connect to that even through some of the difficult times, um, is a good way of keeping yourself grounded within it. Because
it really is.
there must be so many different directions you're pulled in, and challenges, pandemics, and being able to source things and being able to make things happen, and all kinds of different areas could get you going, oh, I'm not
Yeah.
sure about this anymore.
Oh, so easily. It's so, I mean, one thing I've definitely found as a business owner is that it's very easy to be just, yeah, pushed off course at the
Yeah.
slightest thing. You've got to have that why and that motivation to keep you going. Otherwise, it's going to be a really, really uphill struggle.
Mm.
Um,
The other thing that I often talk about whether it's as an employed job or whether you're running your business, is the power of the people that you have around you and the
mhm,
squad that you engage with to help you.
so true.
I'd love to know a little bit about, who are your biggest supporters, and how do they help keep you going when things are tough?
Oh, it's so I have yeah, I've definitely realized that I need to have connection with people.
Yeah.
And that is something I miss from the workplace, because you're automatically thrown into that. And now, as a business owner, you have to go and seek that.
Yeah.
And it's but what I've just made a concerted effort to go and make conversations with, for example, fellow small businesses, and especially people with similar values and mindsets, who are kind of
Yeah.
potentially having similar challenges, um, and just, yeah, they it's really helped. And having potentially an accountability partner to just kind of remind you where you're going, to stay on track. um I've found that has helped me quite a lot.
Yeah, and I think that point about the difference between, almost in a workplace, if you're in an office or if you're in a hospital or if you're in somewhere where you're working, and this is also a challenge for the kind of new hybrid world, but is that you're often with people.
Mm,
So, the old fashioned water cooler conversations, a
yeah,
team meeting, a project team, whatever it is there often are people who are, you're just with them, and it happens by accident, and you create relationships almost kind of an evolutionary
you do,
way
without,
versus
yeah,
a
without,
deliberate way. And
yeah.
I'm really interested to hear this thing around, actually, if you're running your own business and you're kind of doing a solo thing, you're going to have to make the effort and take the time and go and do something. You're going to have to reach out to make those conversations happen. They might not happen in the same accidental evolutionary way as they would if you were all working in an office together.
Absolutely. No, it's very important. And I have definitely found that, whether it's local small business networks or, purpose driven small businesses or whatever, I've sought out sort of groups, similar groups to try and make connections with. And that's really, really helped. And I have to say, actually, even the odd days where I have been able to do pop-ups where I'm selling my things and having that face-to-face conversation with real customers has also given me such joy. So that is really such I definitely have a buzz after a day when I do a pop-up or get to really have conversations with customers.
Yeah, I imagine that's a really lovely thing to have, because after starting kind of on the internet, where you obviously that excitement of the ping and someone's bought your thing, but you don't get to really engage with them on a human level, whereas seeing somebody, maybe I also imagine you with your box of like fabrics, just going in and touching them and looking at them and kind of doing that. I've got that image in my mind, but having other people doing that with the things that you've made with your products and kind of looking at them and loving them and talking about them and putting them on their kids and getting all excited, that must be amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And sharing the why behind what I'm doing and seeing people's reactions and like you say, other people touching and feeling your products. It's just that gives me a huge boost as well.
Obviously, as long as they've got clean hands,
yes,
and not
of course.
dirty ice cream
with
or anything
gloves.
on there. Because you're beautiful material. We don't want to ruin any of those things. It's amazing. And actually, what a lovely story. And where are you heading? What's your, obviously you've got amazing goals going on for the business around values and purpose. Where's your next thing?
It's a good question. And for this year, I wanted to reach out to more retailers. So I have focused on trying to get packages together of products that I could sell into retailers and basically spread my brand and my story on a wider scale. And it's been exciting to be able to have had some success on that front, especially from international retailers. And it's great to know that I've got branded products in different places. So I'd like to carry on with that journey. I'm also, it'd be great to target some UK high street retailers, to go back to my roots and go and be sold in John Lewis. Obviously that would be wonderful. And I'd really, I'm growing, like I said, my product range, and I'd like to be able to kind of give regular, consistent orders to the charity and to the ladies in India, so that they know they've got consistent income coming from me.
Yeah, that would be lovely, wouldn't it? That would kind of really tick the doing the right thing and feeling good about that box as well. Exactly. Just out of interest, have you managed to go out and see some of the people?
So I saw them in December 2019, so just before.
Oh, just before.
Yes, and I just very briefly, met the. I guess I met the kind of the founders and stuff. So I am yet to. I'm hoping this December actually I'll be able to get out there.
Oh, that would be lovely, wouldn't it? You wouldn't have been able to for a couple of years, but
no,
kind
exactly.
of see the whole cycle of things as well. So I wish you well on the journey of growth, because it's a tough one, but actually when you've got such a great product and it means things to people, I think people are in the world are looking for things that are more ethical, that have a more sense of that community, that
Hmm.
are more purposeful. So I'm sure it will go from strength to strength. I can't wait to see it
Thank
on the
you.
British High Street as well. We'll give good vibes
Yes.
to the British High Street. I'm sure lots of people would love to see that. If it's okay with you, I'm going to move on to some quick fire questions.
Yeah.
Right. First one from me is, what is always guaranteed to bring you personally a little bit of work joy?
So I guess we've touched on it a bit and you've painted a picture of me already, but essentially it is, for me, it's surrounding myself with textiles and fabrics and giving myself an opportunity to be really creative.
Yeah.
So I do love that. But also, like we touched on, I discovered that this connection with people is important.
Yeah.
And actually, even if I'm surrounded by fabric and I do designing all day, if I've not had any contact with people, then there's something missing.
Yeah. So actually, the kind of personal creative and the connection with other
Yeah,
people all together. Brilliant.
absolutely.
Question 2. What book are you currently reading?
So I have to be honest and say I'm not much of a reader. I'm better at
Right.
listening at a podcast, but I do
Oh,
have.
yeah. Do a podcast.
No, well, no, I do have a couple of books which I have been, which must be good because I am reading them. So,
Okay. Yeah.
so the first one was it's a book about your first year in business. It's about starting business. So it's called Just Survive Somehow. And it's by Will Stewart, and it's basically everything you need to know to succeed in your first year in business. And he's now founded a company for a few years, but it's basically all his learnings. And I found that it just takes you through very clearly and succinctly how you can run that first year. And it's a lot of prep stuff as well, and really kind of highlighting the kind of potential, not dangers, but the challenges of
Yeah.
running your own business. So it's really good to get your mind in that zone. And it's I'm reading it now. Obviously, I've completed my first year of business, but it's still valid.
Yeah.
So I would, yeah, that's been helpful. And the other one, that is really helpful for people like me who are kind of who've considered moving their side hustle to a full-time business, is the book by Holly Tucker, which is Do What You Love, which
Yeah.
talks a lot about work joy.
Yeah. Love that.
So yeah,
We'll put them in the links as well so that people can see what they
yes,
are.
do.
I like the idea of like that real practical toolkit for like that first year, because the first
Yeah,
year running your own business is really scary, isn't it? And you're making it up as you go along because you don't know, and having some advice and guidance through that, a great idea.
totally. And you
Yeah,
pick up so much along the way that you would have been, yeah, great and very helpful if you'd
yeah.
done that early on,
Yeah. And sometimes you have to learn through the process, and sometimes you can kind of go, oh yeah, wouldn't it have been wonderful if.
Yeah,
But you
exactly.
don't know, do you, at the time? You just don't
Yeah.
know. Okay, question 3. What is the best or most useful bit of advice that someone has given you in your life that you always find yourself coming back to?
So one thing, again, going back to my school days, is something that my old head teacher, I think, said, which was, it's better to regret the things you've done than the things you haven't.
Yeah.
So that's really stuck with me. And I wouldn't say I'm like a huge risk taker as a result of that. But whenever I'm, kind of offered an opportunity, or I think of doing something, but then I'm, imposter syndrome comes in, I try and go back to that saying
Yeah.
and remind myself that what's the worst that can happen.
Yeah. What is the worst that can happen, and how?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I have a theory on like things, people often don't do things because they fear things like rejection, like
Yeah.
people won't like it. But rejection, I think, is a very short-lived emotion. Like you feel bad for like a day or something, and it's a bit.
Yeah,
Ugh.
true.
But regret is a really long,
Long.
long arduous, chronic thing versus kind of a acute pain in the moment.
Yeah,
So I think that idea of actually try some things out, put yourself out there and see what happens. And yeah, don't regret things that you haven't done because you could have just gone and tried it.
definitely. I mean, yeah, in a sense, my business now is basically as a result of that, because I was like, if I've got it in my brain that I want this to happen, then it would just be really frustrating that this would
Yeah.
always be potentially a regret that I didn't
Yeah.
pursue it.
But you have, and it's here, and
Yes,
it's
exactly.
amazing. And you could still be doing something else and not doing it or not stepping into it. And
Yeah,
yeah, and look at all the learning and everything that you've had.
absolutely.
It's amazing. Right. What is one super practical bit of advice for our listeners that they could go and do now, tomorrow, the next day that you think might help them get a little bit of work joy?
So this is something that actually was in Holly Tucker's book, but I really liked the way she described it. But it's really to rewire how you think about work. And
Mm,
so it's not the opposite of your life and what you should just be getting on with. It's not taking away from it, but it's part of your life.
yeah.
So that you grab, you try and grab elements of your day, of your work day, that are adding to your enjoyment and your life, rather than detracting from
Yeah.
focusing on the parts that detract from your what you in theory should be getting on with. So yeah, I think she talks a bit about, like, it's not a balance necessarily, because everything is additional, everything is a brick towards making up,
Mm.
part of your life.
Yeah, and I often get really grumpy about the phrase work-life balance as if they're two
Mm,
separate things. I'm like, number one, they're not two separate things. Life is life and work is a part of life. And
yeah.
all humans work in some way. Like it's just part of what we do. And this idea of like, even if it was a balance, why is work first in that statement?
Yes, I hadn't even thought that.
It's like, and like the order in which we say things matters to our brain, and we say work-life balance and work, work, work. It's like, well, actually,
Yeah,
what about if we thought about life and how work fits into our life and which
into
bits of
it.
it, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm so yeah, totally agree on that one. It's like how we spending, and we spend a third of our entire lives working.
yeah,
So why on earth we want to do that and be grumpy about it or be less joyful about it? It's like find the joy within what you do and work with it. And it's not all going to be joy, right? It's not
no,
100% joy all the time,
of course.
but focusing on it and giving the opportunity. And I get mad when you see all those memes and stuff on social media about, oh, isn't it awful working here? It's like, well, it doesn't have to be. We've got
No,
choices. We can do things.
and that's why I think, yeah, exactly. Even now, I'm pursuing a passion, but there are definitely elements of my day that, are not my favorite thing. But rethinking how my approach to, work is, so that it's all building blocks to my,
Yeah,
to my life, really. It's
yeah, I love that. Such great advice there. And finally, Priya, where can people find out more about you and about your business, and maybe even go and buy some of your wonderful products?
Oh, well, come on over to, yeah. So my website is www.pripri, that's pripri.co.uk. And my Instagram and Facebook are at pripri.co.uk. And you can find me on LinkedIn as well, on Priya Velusami. And just, yeah, I'd love to have a chat with anyone. And if anything's interesting or interested in, if you're interested in what I'm doing.
Brilliant. What we will also do is we'll put those links in the show notes so that rather than people typing them out, they can just go and click on
Yeah,
them and come through and find out all about your wonderful products and your wonderful business and how you're reusing, recycling, enabling people to develop their skills and get jobs and all the wonderful things that you are doing.
thanks.
Priya, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been so lovely having you here.
Oh, thank you very much for having me, Beth. It's been a pleasure.
A huge thank you to Priya for joining me on this episode of the WorkJoy Jam. Taken so many lovely things from my conversation with Priya and from her approach, thinking about baking in that values-led, purpose-led approach to your business from the beginning. The idea of reusing and recycling and upcycling, as well as thinking about how do we give back to the communities. Things like working with a charity to help develop your business. Things like using and reusing old saris, and the lovely connection to the childhood passions with her grandma sat at a sewing machine, being taught how to do these things. And then, you know, many, many years later, creating a business out of that passion area. But also understanding that with working in your passion also comes stuff that maybe isn't in your wheelhouse, and that sense of learning and growth and some of those things that you'll be able to take and find new areas of joy from, and somewhere it might still be a challenge. And that's the real world of work, and learning new things, wearing many, many different hats as your business grows and expands. I think this idea of also, in the world we've been in with things like pandemics, having to pivot your business, having to change quickly and find new and different ways of serving your customers. So a huge thank you to Priya for coming on to the WorkJoy Jam podcast. Really great to hear from you. And one last thing that I was thinking about from Priya's conversation is this idea that if you are going out, if you're doing a side hustle, if you're building a business, reaching out to people, getting involved with networks, with other people, similar groups who are in your world, can be a really great way of ensuring that you are feeling supported and connected rather than all alone in this scary world of business development. Well, if you are interested in our other podcasts, we have 5 seasons now. Go and have a listen. I like to think of it as a bit of a pick and mix, pick something or a topic or a person that you're interested in and see where that leads you. Do make sure you're following us on all the socials. You can sign up to my freebie, WorkJoy, Where Do You Get Yours? It's a little experiment. You can find it on the website, and it will just help you to understand a little bit more about where are you getting some of your joy from and how might you cultivate a little bit more in your working life. Thank you.